Sit at the kids' table, Jenna. You always embarrass us in front of real guests. My mother-in-law pulled the chair out from beside my husband and pointed at the fold-out table in the corner of the dining room. The plastic one, with the crayon marks, where the grandchildren ate. She said it quietly enough that the partners from my husband's law firm wouldn't catch every word, but loudly enough that every person in that room felt the vibration of it. I sat at the kids' table. I was 38 years old. I was a federally appointed judge. I sat at the kids' table and cut my niece's turkey into small pieces and told myself, the way I had been telling myself for 11 years, that I was keeping the peace. My name's Jenna Aldcroft. And what happened at Pearson International Airport 3 weeks later is something I will spend the rest of my life quietly grateful for. Let me take you back to that Thanksgiving dinner first, because you cannot understand the airport without understanding that dining room. The house was in Forest Hill, Toronto, the kind of neighborhood where the driveways are heated and the Christmas wreaths cost $400. My mother-in-law, Sylvia, had lived there for 30 years. My father-in-law had built the house. When he died, she stayed, and the house became her headquarters, the seat of her authority over every member of the family who ate at her table. My husband, Callum, was her youngest and her favorite. He loved me genuinely, I have never doubted that. But he had grown up in a household where Sylvia's comfort was the organizing principle of every room, every conversation, every Christmas morning. Confronting her was, for him, a kind of vertigo. He simply couldn't find the floor. His older brother, Fletcher, had married a woman named Diane, who had figured out within 6 months of joining this family that the only way to survive Sylvia was to become her deputy. Diane coordinated the dinner seating. Diane sourced the wine. Diane arranged flowers that Sylvia got the credit for. And Diane had, over 11 years, participated enthusiastically in the quiet, consistent project of making sure I understood I did not belong. I had grown up in Thunder Bay, my father drove a school bus, my mother worked at the hospital laundry. I had put myself through law school on bursaries and a weekend job at a grocery store on Yonge Street. When I passed the bar, I called home from a payphone outside Osgood because I hadn't owned a cell phone yet. My mother cried. My father said he was going to take a picture of my name in the phone book. Sylvia had never once asked me about any of this. What she knew about me was that I had not gone to Upper Canada College, that my parents did not summer anywhere, and that I had not given Callum children yet, a fact she referenced at irregular intervals with the kind of artful indirection that leaves no fingerprints. What she did not know, what no one in that house knew, was that 6 months earlier I had been appointed to the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. I was a judge, a sitting judge. The appointment had come through quietly, the way these things do, and I had not yet had my formal investiture ceremony. I was still in the transition period, still finalizing administrative matters, officially on leave from my Bay Street firm. To the family, I was still simply Callum's wife who worked in some kind of law thing. I had not corrected this, not because I was building to a theatrical reveal. I kept it quiet because every time I had achieved something in my life, the achievement had been converted, in Sylvia's dining room, into evidence of a character flaw. I made partner at 33. She said I was probably difficult to work with. I won a litigation case that made the Globe and Mail. She said the journalist had probably gotten the details wrong. I had learned, slowly and at some cost to my self-esteem, that sharing good news in that house only gave her better ammunition. So I sat at the kids' table at Thanksgiving and said nothing. My 6-year-old niece, Sylvia's granddaughter, looked at me with enormous brown eyes and said, "Auntie Jenna, why do you always sit here with us?" I told her it was because I liked her company best. She thought about that. Then she said, "Mummy says you don't fit in properly." Nobody at the adults' table heard this. I know because not a single person looked up. After dinner, Fletcher announced that the family would be flying to Vancouver for the long weekend in December. He had rented a chalet near Whistler, a genuine chalet, the kind you see in the background of luxury ski advertisements, with a private hot tub and a kitchen designed by someone who had opinions about countertop stone. He pulled up photos on his phone and passed it around. Sylvia clapped her hands together like a child. Diane began listing which rooms she had assigned to which family members. "Callum and I were given a room in the garden suite," she said, "separate from the main chalet, connected by an outdoor path." She said it with the tone of someone doing us a favor. The garden suite was, as she described it, more private. What she didn't say, but what everyone understood, was that it was also the smallest accommodation, the one farthest from the kitchen, and the living room, and the fireplace where the real socializing happened. Then Sylvia looked at me across the table. "Jenna, we'll need someone to handle the airport logistics. Bag drop, check-in kiosks, getting Mum through security with her knee. You're always so capable with that sort of thing." She smiled. "Fletcher's partners will be flying on the same morning. It would look so polished if everything moved smoothly." I understood exactly what she was saying. She was saying, "Jenna will be the help." Callum pressed his knee against mine under the table. It was the gesture he had been making for 11 years. A small, warm, inadequate apology. I pressed back. I always pressed back. We had our own private language of apologies and silences, Callum and I, built over a decade of letting things go. I smiled at Sylvia and said that would be fine. In the car on the way home, driving west on St. Clair, Callum said, "She doesn't mean it the way it sounds." I said, "I know." Neither of us said anything for a long time after that. What Callum did not know, and what I want to explain carefully because I have read the questions people ask about women in my situation, women who swallow things for years, is why I had stayed quiet so long. It was not weakness. It was not a failure of self-respect. It was grief. Complicated, specific grief over the family I had wanted to have. I had watched Callum's face at every holiday, and I had seen how much he loved being in that house, how much his mother's approval lit something in him that nothing else could reach. I had told myself, for years, that the cost of protecting that was something I could afford. I had been wrong, but understanding that you've been wrong is not the same as knowing what to do about it. On the Wednesday before the Vancouver trip, I was sitting in my chambers at Osgoode Hall when my clerk knocked and handed me an envelope from the Chief Justice's office. My investor had been moved up. The formal ceremony was scheduled for the Monday after the Vancouver weekend. The announcement would go to the press on Friday. I sat with that envelope for a long time. Then I made a phone call to someone I trusted, a friend, a woman who had known me since law school, who had watched 11 years of Thanksgiving dinners from the outside. When I told her what I was thinking, she was quiet for a moment. She said, "Jenna, don't carry their luggage." I told her I had already promised. She said, "Unpromise, I didn't." I drove to Sylvia's house on Saturday morning and loaded 4 large suitcases into the back of my Subaru while Callum held the door. Sylvia stood on the porch in her coat, watching, not offering to help, describing to Diane the specific way she wanted her carry-on handled through security because of her knee. Fletcher's law partners were flying on the same Air Canada flight. 2 senior partners from the firm, men with pocket squares and opinions about the lounge at Terminal 1. Fletcher had emailed me their names the week before and asked me to ensure they had a seamless airport experience. I had not responded to the email. At the airport, Sylvia walked ahead with Fletcher and Diane. Callum walked beside his mother. I walked behind with the luggage cart, 4 heavy cases and 2 carry-ons, steering through the Pearson International departure hall while families streamed around me, and the December morning light came flat and cold through the terminal windows. At the Air Canada check-in counter, Sylvia turned to me and held out a printed boarding pass. It was a middle seat, row 31, between the lavatories. "I booked your ticket separately," she said, in the same tone she used to describe Garden Suite logistics. Economy was much more sensible for a short flight. "You understand?" She had booked herself and Fletcher and Diane and Callum in business class. She had booked me in economy, row 31, middle seat, and she had done it without mentioning it, without asking, without the slightest indication that she thought this required any explanation at all. I looked at the boarding pass. Callum had gone pale. I could see it from where I was standing, the color leaving his face, the specific stillness of a man who knows something is wrong and does not know how to stop it. He opened his mouth. Sylvia said, "Don't make a fuss, Callum. It's 1 hour." I thought about the past 11 years, the plastic chair at the children's table, the garden suite, the luggage cart, the email about seamless airport experiences. I thought about what my friend had said. I set the boarding pass down on the counter. I reached into my coat pocket and took out my federal judicial identification card, the one issued by the Office of the Commissioner for Federal Judicial Affairs, the one with the gold crest, and I presented it to the Air Canada agent at the priority check-in desk. "My name is Jenna Aldcroft," I said. "I'm a judge of the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. I believe there may be a security matter that requires attention." The agent looked at my identification. Her expression changed in the way that expressions change when the category of a situation shifts. She made a phone call. What happened in the next 4 minutes I will try to describe accurately, because I know how it sounds, and I want you to understand that I did not plan this. I had not orchestrated a theatrical intervention. What I had done was make one phone call the previous evening to the RCMP liaison officer who handled judicial security protocols at Pearson, a man I knew professionally, a man who, when I explained my situation, had said very quietly, "Your Honor, you should have called us sooner." 2 uniformed RCMP officers came through the priority lane. They were followed by an Air Canada duty manager and a woman from airport security in a dark blazer. They stopped in front of me, and the senior officer, a woman, mid-40s, with the particular calm of someone who has diffused complicated situations before breakfast, turned to address the group. "Your Honor," she nodded to me, "we've been briefed. Your travel arrangements have been corrected. We'll escort you directly to the departure gate." Sylvia said, "I'm sorry, what?" Nobody answered her. "Who are those officers?" It wasn't a question. It was the sound a person makes when reality is failing to cooperate. Callum was completely still. Fletcher had gone the color of old snow. The duty manager said, "Miss Aldcroft, Air Canada would like to extend our apologies for the booking error. We've arranged a seat in executive class for you. We'd also like to offer you the use of the Maple Leaf Lounge for the duration of your wait." Sylvia stepped forward. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'm this young woman's mother-in-law. We're traveling together as a family." The RCMP officer said, "Ma'am, please step back." "I will not step back. I am Sylvia, ma'am." The officer's voice did not rise. It simply became more specific. "Please step back from the secured area." I watched Sylvia's face process what was happening. I have seen that process before in courtrooms when a witness realizes the version of events they've prepared is not going to hold. First the confusion, then the rapid recalculation. Then, in Sylvia's case, the performance pivot. She turned to the two law partners who were standing 20 feet away at their own check-in desk, watching all of this unfold, and she laughed, a short, brittle laugh, and said, "She always did have a flair for drama." Neither of the law partners laughed back. Fletcher's senior partner, a man I had appeared before in arbitration, a man who knew exactly who I was and what my appointment meant, set down his boarding pass and looked at Fletcher. His expression was not one I would have wanted directed at me. I turned to face Sylvia. My voice was the same voice I use in court. Not raised, not performed, just clear. "I have carried your bags through this airport because you asked me to, and because I have been trying, for 11 years, to be part of this family. I have sat at the children's table at every dinner because I did not want to embarrass Callum. I have let you describe my career as some kind of law thing in front of your friends and your son's colleagues, and I have said nothing." I paused. Let the terminal noise fill the space. "I was appointed to the Ontario Superior Court of Justice in June. I will be sworn in on Monday. You were not told because every time something good happened to me in my life, you found a way to make me wish I hadn't mentioned it. That is not a family, that is a performance, and I have been the prop." I looked at Callum. His eyes were wet. He looked like a man who had just understood something he had spent a long time not understanding. "You could have told me," he said. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry I didn't." I turned back to the officer. "I'm ready." The RCMP escort moved with me toward the secure corridor. Behind me, I heard Sylvia saying something, her voice climbing now, something about respect, and what she had done for this family, and what kind of a daughter-in-law did this to people in a public airport. I did not turn around. I heard Fletcher's senior partner say to Fletcher, very quietly but not quietly enough, "You didn't know your wife was a superior court judge?" I did not hear Fletcher's answer. The departure lounge was calm and warm. A woman at the Air Canada desk brought me a coffee without being asked and set it on the table next to my gate without a word, a small civilian kindness that I found, in that moment, almost more than I could hold. I sat in a chair by the window and watched the planes move on the tarmac and drank the coffee and did not cry, because I had learned a long time ago how to save that for later. My phone was full by the time we boarded. 3 messages from Sylvia, escalating in register from dignified injury to outright accusation. 2 from Diane, who had decided I was mentally unstable. 1 from Fletcher, short and stiff, saying he hoped I understood the position I had put this family in. 1 from Callum. It said, "I should have stopped her years ago. I am so sorry. Can we talk when we land?" I replied to Callum's message. I left the others unread. I flew to Vancouver in the 3rd row of executive class, in a window seat with a glass of sparkling water and a blanket that had not been used by anyone else. I watched the Rockies appear below me through a break in the cloud. Those enormous, indifferent mountains that have been there longer than any of us, and will be there long after every family drama in every airport in this country has been forgotten. When we landed at YVR and I walked through the arrivals corridor, my phone rang. It was my friend from law school. "I heard," she said. "How did you hear?" She said, "Jenna, it's on Twitter." Someone had filmed part of the airport scene on their phone. The clip was 18 seconds long. It showed Sylvia's face when the RCMP officer told her to step back, and then it showed my face as I delivered the part about the children's table, and it had been shared 40,000 times by the time the plane touched down. The comments were not kind to Sylvia. Fletcher's senior partner called Fletcher that afternoon and resigned from the Whistler weekend. His reasons, as reported back to me through Callum, were not complicated. He had been considering whether to recommend Fletcher for a significant appointment to a provincial advisory board. He was no longer considering it. Diane texted me to say that I had destroyed Christmas. I did not respond. At the chalet that evening, I stayed because Callum asked me to stay and because the mountains were extraordinary and I had not done anything wrong. Sylvia came to find me. I was on the deck, in a coat, watching the light change on the snow. She appeared in the doorway, and she stood there for a moment without speaking, which was unusual for her. When she finally spoke, it was not what I expected. She said, "I didn't know." I turned around. "About the judgeship," she said. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't. You should have told us." I looked at her for a long moment. The cold air came off the mountain and moved between us. Sylvia, I said, there is a 6-year-old girl at your dinner table who tells her aunt she doesn't fit in properly. She didn't arrive at that idea on her own. Sylvia opened her mouth, then she closed it. I don't need an apology tonight, I said. I need 11 years of behavior to change. Those are different things. One of them takes 5 minutes. The other one is going to take a lot longer. I turned back to the mountains. Behind me, I heard her come out onto the deck. She stood there. She didn't speak again for a while, but she stayed, which was not nothing. The Sylvia vocabulary of gestures, staying was close to the most she knew how to do. Later in the room, Callum and I talked for 3 hours. It was the most honest conversation we had ever had. It covered things I had kept in the children's table corner of my heart for over a decade, things he had known and not named, things neither of us had been brave enough to put in the middle of the room where they had to be looked at directly. It was not a comfortable conversation. It was, I think, the one we should have been having every year. We are still having it. That conversation has not ended yet. I don't think it will for some time. The investiture ceremony took place on a Monday morning at Osgood Hall, in a wood-paneled courtroom with tall windows and the smell of old books and 100 years of serious decisions. Callum sat in the front row. His mother sat beside him. She had asked, through Callum, whether she could come. I had said yes. She wore a coat I had not seen before, dark green, more subdued than her usual. When the Chief Justice addressed me, when they placed the robes on my shoulders and called me to the bench, I looked out at the courtroom from the front and I saw my mother-in-law's face. She was crying. I do not know what she was crying about. I did not ask. People cry for complicated reasons, and only some of them are the right ones. But she was there, and she was looking at me, and for the first time in 11 years she was looking at me the way you look at a person you have perhaps misjudged, a person whose story you realize you do not fully know. It was a beginning, a small one. I'm not sure yet what it will grow into. What I know is this. I went home from that ceremony and I called my mother in Thunder Bay. She answered on the second ring, the way she always does, as though she has been waiting. I told her I had been sworn in. I told her it had gone well. She said, "Oh, Jenna," in the voice she has used my whole life. The voice that means I see you, I have always seen you, you came from something real. My father got on the phone. He said, "Are you one of those judges that gets to wear the robe?" I told him yes. He said, "I'm going to tell the guys on the route." He meant the school bus route. He meant he was going to drive through the streets of Thunder Bay with his daughter's news on his face like a lantern, telling every person who boarded his bus that his kid was a judge now. I got off the phone and I stood in my kitchen in the November dark, the city quiet outside the window, and I let myself feel, for a long and uninterrupted moment, how far I had come from that grocery store on Yonge Street, where I had worked weekends so I could stay in law school. Nobody gave me that distance. I built it, kilometer by kilometer, in a country that asked a lot and gave back slowly. I built it on early mornings and borrowed textbooks and 11 years of sitting at children's tables while I told myself I was keeping the peace. I was not keeping the peace. I was keeping the secret. There is a difference, and learning it cost me more than it should have. But the mountains don't care about any of that. They were there before the airport, before Sylvia, before the first time someone put me at the wrong table. They were there when the plane flew over them, and I looked down and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like the size of things had been correctly arranged. I still live in Toronto. Callum and I still drive to Forest Hill for some dinners. Sylvia sets a place for me at the main table now, every time, without being reminded. She has not explained this change, and I have not asked her to. Some things are better understood in the doing than the explaining. My niece asked me at Easter what I do at work. I told her I listen to both sides of difficult situations and try to find the truth. She thought about it. Then she said, "Like a referee?" I told her something like that. She said, "Cool," and went back to her food. That felt about right.